Support for podcasts comes from Milwaukee School of Engineering Center for Professional Education, offering courses in AI machine learning, project management, and more. Program information at msoe.edu/CPE.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Excret Nunez. Today, we'll look at what economic impact the Republican National Convention had in the city.
A lot of these reports are pretty good at the adding and multiplying. They're just very poor at the subtracting.
We'll speak with the street artist behind the koi fish you see around Milwaukee about a project he did in Walker's Point this year.
I moved out of Milwaukee out of fear of being arrested for graffiti because I wanted to pursue street art. So it is quite beautiful for the city to see what I do as art and not to see it as graffiti.
Plus, we'll meet a local metal detectorist that helps people find treasure on their properties. All that's coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Excret Nunez. Thanks for joining us today. We'll start with this. Milwaukee hosted the Republican National Convention last year. City officials touted a potential economic windfall. Visit Milwaukee released a report claiming the event carried a $321 million economic impact. But this number doesn't include normal business that was crowded out by the RNC. Instead, it's a tally of what was spent by visitors and the cost of putting on the event. Lake Effect's Sam Woods looks at what's in the report.
1 year ago, the Pfizer Forum sounded like this.
I raised my right arm, looked at the thousands and thousands of people that were breathlessly waiting, and started shouting, "Fight, fight, fight."
City officials sounded like this.
There were a lot of people, tens of thousands, that came to Milwaukee, that stayed at our hotels, that ventured into restaurants, that spent money with local vendors, and left a significant amount of money here in our economy.
And some downtown businesses sounded like this.
I know I've read a lot of things where they say there's going to be 50,000 people here. This looks like a weak Admirals game. There's just not a lot of people down here.
When the RNC came to town last year, many had high hopes of an economic windfall as 50,000 visitors were expected to come to Milwaukee, spend money here, and go home to tell everyone what a wonderful place this is to visit. In May, a long-awaited report on economic activity from the event reported a $321 million economic impact, far exceeding the city's goal of $200 million. But there's one piece missing from this analysis: loss of normal business that was crowded out. Greg Pepitone, Associate Director of Tourism Economics, the firm that compiled the report, said this is because the report is meant to measure the economic impact of visitors only, not the totality of economic activity during the week of the RNC.
Our impact study represents what you might consider the gross economic impacts during the RNC. So the analysis doesn't include displacement or losses in spending by visitors that would have come to Milwaukee.
But not all economists see this as the best way to measure economic impact. Victor Matheson, a professor of economics at the College of the Holy Cross, has published his own economic impact of past political conventions, though not one for Milwaukee's RNC specifically. He says these economic impact reports tend to make conventions look like a better economic deal than they really are, because they exclude economic activity that was crowded out by the event.
The regular who's at the bar who says, "Man, I'm not coming in this week because it's just too much of a zoo down here. I have to go through police barricades and everything just to get to work, so I'm not going to work." And you're never surveying that person about what they didn't spend that week. And so a lot of these reports are pretty good at the adding and multiplying. They're just very poor at the subtracting.
But before getting into what is not counted, let's examine how the report calculates economic impact. The report breaks down this impact into three categories of direct, indirect, and induced spending. Direct spending refers to spending by visitors during the RNC and spending by vendors to put on the event itself. Examples of this kind of spending would be booking a hotel for the week or what a delegate spends on lunch at a local restaurant. Pepitone said this data comes from sources like the RNC Host Committee, the RNC itself, Milwaukee City Government, Visit Milwaukee, and select businesses, as well as attendance data and lodging data to measure hotel occupancies and short-term rentals like Airbnbs. Pepitone said indirect and induced spending counts the type of spending that is not directly related to the convention, but would not have otherwise occurred if not for the convention. Here is an example of indirect spending.
So, for example, if a visitor goes to a restaurant and they order a meal, that restaurant is going to have to purchase food from a local wholesaler, right? That purchase of food is considered an indirect impact.
Similarly, an induced impact refers to workers spending wages that they earned via the convention.
So someone that's working in one of those direct industries or one of those indirect industries, they're going to earn a wage, spend a portion of that wage in the local economy. And so that's considered an induced impact.
In total, the report claims all of this spending added up to $321 million of economic impact on the local economy. Stepping back from the event itself and looking at overall economic figures for Milwaukee and surrounding counties, the $321 million figure seems to get a bit murkier. According to state tax records, hotel sales were up 42% in Milwaukee County in July 2024 compared to July 2023. But food and drink sales were down 1%, and arts and entertainment sales were down 19% in the same time frame. Surrounding counties had similar mixed economic results based on taxable sales, with some industries up compared to the year before and others down. You can find more information on each county's taxable sales records at wuwm.com. This big boost in hotel sales in Milwaukee County compared to drops in restaurant and entertainment industries might suggest that the RNC successfully boosted hotel sales while crowding out normal business in other industries. But Pepitone says when it comes to tourism specifically, he believes it's more likely tourists rescheduled their visits to Milwaukee rather than outright canceling them.
Displaced is a complex term as well, because we have to understand what is that typical leisure traveler going to do? Are they going to cancel their trip to Milwaukee altogether? Or are they rescheduling it for later that summer or earlier that summer or a different time throughout the year?
When comparing June and August 2024 to 2023, it's unclear if this was borne out, as some industries were up and others down. Perhaps 2025 data will reveal visitors rescheduled their trips for the summer after the RNC. But whether or not tourists return in 2025 to boost restaurant and entertainment industries, one thing is clear. Hotels did very well during the RNC. Matheson says this is typical of political conventions.
We typically get about a $20 million boost in hotel sales, but everything else is pretty much flat, right? So again, those hotel folks who come in and spend a lot of money, they displace the regulars, they displace the regular tourists, the regular folks. So we usually don't see a lot of increases in things like, food spending or retail sales or other things like amusement parks or museums that you could go to instead. But we do usually see a big spike in hotels. That's kind of the one thing that always shows up. Otherwise, it's really not a great event for cities besides that.
Stepping even further back, some stress the importance of examining the impact of the RNC in the context of how large the economy is over a given year. Dr. Michael Farrell is an assistant professor of finance at UW-Milwaukee. He notes that the economic impact of political conventions, regardless if it's the DNC or the RNC, can seem bigger than they really are when compared to general economic activity.
I would say that it was a significant event for the hospitality industry. It represents about 7% of the local economic impact for their sector. Outside of this, if we look at the greater Milwaukee area, it's a relatively small number. So a back-of-the-envelope estimate is about 1 day's worth of GDP. That could be a big number or a small number depending on your perspective.
Before beginning his research on the economic impact of political conventions more than a decade ago, Matheson measured the economic impact of sporting events. He says the two types of events have similar economic impact stories, but carry one key difference.
Most of the evidence suggests that if you host a Super Bowl, if you host an NBA or Major League Baseball All-Star game, if you get to play in the NBA Finals like the Bucks did a few years ago, the evidence really is that it's not going to make your city rich, but it's likely to make you happy because these are fun events that most of the population can get behind. The problem with a political convention is there's just no evidence of a feel-good effect here either, right? Because you've got a Republican convention in deep blue Milwaukee County, and even if it was a Democratic convention in Milwaukee, we know that half of the state's red rather than blue. So we can all, bleed green and gold for the PAC, but you don't bleed red for the Republicans necessarily. And so this is not something that has that same sort of feel-good effect that you might be left with with other types of major events.
That piece was produced by Lake Effect's Sam Woods. At the start of the year, Governor Tony Evers announced an effort to allow citizen-led referendums in Wisconsin. This process would allow voters to directly enact policies without the legislature's approval. To help explain what a citizen-led referendum is and how it works in other states, I'm joined by Derek Klinger, a senior staff attorney with the State Democracy Research Initiative. He begins by talking about Governor Evers' proposal.
Just unpacking his announcement a little more, he proposed adopting three forms of the citizen-led initiative and referendum power. One of these would create a petition process allowing the people to propose and approve amendments to the state constitution, basically allowing Wisconsinites to go around the legislature. Another would create a petition process allowing the people to propose and approve state laws, again, allowing the people to go around the legislature. And the third would create a petition process that would allow the people to hold an election to approve or reject laws passed by the legislature. Now, other technical and procedural details would need to be worked out to create a functioning initiative and referendum process. But broadly speaking, the proposal would create these petition processes to give people a more direct policy-making role in the state.
That's interesting. So how many other states have this citizen ballot initiative and referendum process already in place?
Yeah, so about half the states have at least one form of the initiative or referendum. And there's some real diversity within this group of states. It's not just limited to any particular region of the country, nor is this limited to like red states, blue states, or even just purple states. It's kind of a mix.
Yeah, and if it's something that's already kind of common with like half the country, why doesn't Wisconsin have a process like this already?
Well, one thing that's important to note is Wisconsin actually has a process like this at the local level in cities and villages. In state law, it's called the direct legislation process. The citizens can use a petition process to propose ordinances and resolutions. So this concept isn't entirely foreign to Wisconsin. But why doesn't Wisconsin have this at the statewide level? Well, the initiative and referendum process would require authorization in the state constitution. I guess the short answer is the Constitution has never authorized it. When the state was founded in the 1850s, or a little before then, no state had adopted the citizen-led initiative and referendum power at the statewide level. So it really wasn't even up for discussion at that point. And it wasn't until the end of the 19th century, the early 20th century, that the statewide initiative and referendum caught on with states. Now, interestingly, the question to whether to amend the Constitution to allow this process was actually put to the voters in 1914. And the voters rejected it pretty handily at that. So I suspect that defeat has slowed any momentum behind it. Now, in the 100 or so years since then, there have been several dozen proposals in the legislature to amend the state constitution to allow the initiative and referendum. But none of them have been submitted for a vote to the people since.
Thanks for clarifying that. So What are some examples of how people in other states have used the citizen referendum process to make changes to their state laws or constitution?
Yeah, so just from the past decade or so, people in other states have used the initiative process to adopt policies like increasing the minimum wage, expanding Medicaid, limiting gerrymandering, passing campaign finance reforms, and perhaps most prominently, protecting access to abortion.
And is it common that citizen referendums pass in other states? I know you just listed a few examples, but is it common or often that this happens?
Actually, no. So if you look at all the citizen-initiated measures that have been proposed over the past, 100 or so years, only about 40% of them were approved. I think that's important to note because it shows that voters tend to approach these measures with some healthy skepticism. But just because something is on the ballot does not mean it will be approved.
Right. And so, what are some reasons people support citizen-led referendums, and what are some criticisms of this process?
I think the main reason people support the initiative and referendum is that it provides a way for the people to get policies they want when their elected officials otherwise appear unresponsive to the public's concerns. And from that, others say that the initiative referendum can encourage maybe more interest and participation in the democratic process. There are a few main criticisms. Those kind of range from concerns that initiated measures might be poorly written, or maybe they'll have unintended consequences. There are concerns that minority groups might be targeted or suffer from certain initiatives, or that maybe well-financed special interest groups might use the process to change the law to benefit them financially.
That makes sense. So, if this process were brought to a statewide level here in Wisconsin, what are some proposals Wisconsinites might want to put on a ballot?
Yeah, I think if Wisconsinites had the initiative right now, we might see initiatives to increase the minimum wage, maybe to legalize medical marijuana, maybe even recreational marijuana, maybe enact gun safety measures to maybe guarantee abortion rights in the state constitution, or maybe to reform the state's redistricting process. And also don't want to forget about the veto referendum process either. Again, that's the process that would allow voters to weigh in on laws passed by the legislature. And an example that jumps out to me is Act 10 from 2011. This is the law that effectively ended collective bargaining rights for public sector unions. I would think if Wisconsin had the veto referendum in place in 2011, when that law was first enacted, you very likely would have seen that law put up for a vote by the people. And the similar thing happened in Ohio. A very similar law was passed, but in Ohio, the people have the veto referendum, and so they put that law up for a vote and rejected it.
So we've established that there's no pathway for Wisconsinites to enact or reject a new state law or amend the Constitution. But, Wisconsin voters did see 5 statewide referendum questions on their ballot last year. So how do those referendums get on a ballot?
Yeah, so there are a few types of statewide referendums that Wisconsin voters currently can see on their ballots. This includes questions about whether to approve or reject amendments to the state constitution. Those are proposed by the Wisconsin legislature. And as you mentioned, voters saw 5 of those last year. Another type of question voters can see is called an advisory question. These basically try to take the pulse of states' voters on particular issues, but don't have any legally binding effect. Voters most recently saw one of those in April 2023, when they're asked if childless adults should be required to look for work in order to receive welfare benefits. There are a few others types of questions that are much more narrowly focused, but the bottom line is that right now only the Wisconsin legislature can put statewide referendums on the ballot.
So I'm wondering, why do lawmakers go through this referendum process as opposed to working it out through the legislature?
Yeah, there are a few reasons why lawmakers might do this. Keeping in mind right now that Republicans control the legislature and that the governor is a Democrat and they might not necessarily agree on everything. The current referendum process allows legislators to get past the governor, who has the power to veto laws he disagrees with, but does not have the power to stop these referendums from going on the ballot. So it's a way for the legislature to try to get measures they support, but that the governor does not, in place. But another reason is the state's courts. Even if a law has been enacted, there is the possibility that the state's courts could declare the law unconstitutional. but amending the Constitution to allow for a certain policy takes away that possibility. And just one other consideration is that these can have an impact on voter turnout. Having particular issues on the ballot might encourage people to turn out to vote who otherwise might have stayed home. But that could also be a set of citizen-led initiatives. Those can drive turnout as well.
So earlier we talked about how in other states, how often citizen referendums on the ballot pass. So how often do legislative referendums pass in Wisconsin?
Yeah, so Wisconsin voters tend to approve measures proposed by the legislature. Going all the way back to the 1850s, about 75% of all constitutional amendments proposed by the legislature have been approved by the voters.
And why do some people support Wisconsin referendum process, and what are some criticisms of it?
I think the arguments for and against this current process are probably the same, which is that the legislature serves as basically a gatekeeper for the Constitution. Supporters of the current process might point to that and say that the legislative process to get referendums on the ballot results in better designed or more well thought out policies. Critics might point to that same gatekeeper role and say that it limits the debate to measures that are supported by the legislature, but keeps off measures that enjoy broad support but are opposed by the legislature.
Well, Derek, thank you so much for speaking with me today and explaining the state's referendum process to me.
Yeah, thank you.
Derek Klinger is a senior staff attorney with the State Democracy Research Initiative at the University of Wisconsin Law School. Lake Effect is available as a podcast, so you can listen whenever you like. Find it wherever you get your podcasts, then subscribe, download, and listen on demand. In about 15 minutes, we'll learn about the hobby of metal detecting and meet a local man who searches old homes for hidden treasures. But first, we'll speak with the street artist behind the koi fish you see around Milwaukee. That's coming up on Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Excret Nunez. Even if you may not recognize Jeremy Novi's name, you almost certainly have come across his street art here in Milwaukee. Novi is a Wisconsin native, and his signature koi fish stencils have decorated Milwaukee streets since 2006. This fall, the Wisconsin LGBTQ History Project commissioned Novi to design rainbow crosswalks at the intersection of 2nd and National in the Walker's Point neighborhood. It's home to most of the city's remaining queer bars. Jeremy Novi joins Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski to talk about his work and the new crosswalk.
Even if people aren't familiar with your name directly, they're certainly familiar with your koi fish street art, which has decorated our streets since 2006. But before you became known for the koi fish, how did you originally get started in street art?
So I was going to UW Milwaukee. I was studying photography, and I started to kind of create what I called urban still lifes, where I put things on the street and photograph them. And then in turn, I started to do stencils. And a particular project that I did put stencils of doors and windows on boarded up buildings throughout Milwaukee. And when the Wisconsin State Journal had an interview and they asked the Milwaukee Department of Public Works, the people that actually give out a ticket for graffiti or remove it, they said in their statement that they only wish I didn't have a surface to do my art on. At which time sparked this big idea in my head that I can create art that can cause social change, or that can really kind of invoke something more than just being in a gallery or a museum.
Was that kind of your aha moment that it clicked for you that activism through street art was your calling or was something that was most important to you?
Yeah, no, it definitely was an aha moment of like what I wanted to do as an artist and how I wanted to be an activist, not just an artist, and using art as a tool to be an activist, to make people hear my voice and to hear what I have to say and listen in that matter.
When you were really coming into your style and learning what you wanted to focus on, did you have any art history or artists that have influenced you that you admire and help shape your style, or just that you have, taken an example from, essentially?
Well, early on, there's a lot of sticker books, and so I kind of was influenced by Shepard Fairey's, like kind of branding an image out there, and like seeing an image over and over again. And then, of course, there's Banksy, who started to make stencils that did definitely have like kind of a political message behind them, kind of usually something for change, like human issues or whatever, in a society. And so I guess like those things kind of together inspired me to do this. But also having some classes at UW Milwaukee with some certain teachers, Nicholas Lampert, and kind of showing me art that was intervention and that art was like put out there to cause a change. And I guess those things together kind of brought forth who I am as an artist.
So I'm really drawn to the way you use negative space and shadows in your art. What's something that you hear over and over about your work that resonates with others who come across it?
Well, with the koi particularly, they really enjoy the 3D aspect of it. And they enjoy like kind of just finding it in the world as if it's like an Easter egg they're kind of hunting for.
Can you talk a bit about the evolution of the koi, like why you were drawn to them, what it symbolizes to you, and why they're kind of these beautiful little scavenger pieces to find in any given city?
In 2006, I had the opportunity to study abroad while going to UW Milwaukee. And while I was there, I studied a lot of different like art things. And when I came back, I had to do an art project to get credit for being in China. So I came up with the idea of the koi, using some different things of juxtaposition of nature with modern materials being concrete, which is kind of a big thing in Asian art right now, is juxtaposition of ancient art with contemporary art. And so the combining of these two materials made me think about putting out koi. And, at first they were in Milwaukee and they started on the Oak Leaf Bike Trail, which a lot of people may have used the bus stops there. There's, I think, three different bus stops that are located at that North and Oakland intersection. And while you're waiting for the bus stops, you're like looking over at the bike trail. And the bike trail I saw as a river, as the first location. But then moving to bigger cities that have more kind of urban blight, or neighborhoods that are kind of underappreciated or underused, I started putting koi there because I thought that those places needed some brightening and those places needed a little bit of zen. And at first, they didn't have a shadow, but about 8 years ago, I ended up adding the drop shadow, based on some paintings I was doing. Yeah, and now I've done like a 90-foot koi. I've done intersections with seven koi and kind of going a bit bigger.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of going a bit bigger and having koi fish as well, you designed the rainbow crosswalks that are going to be installed on 2nd and National here in Milwaukee. Can you briefly describe your design for us? I'm curious about your process. Do you like to hand draw it out, or are you a digital person when planning a bigger piece like this?
At first, I like to hand draw things, very kind of rough sketch, and submitted that. But because I'm working with city officials and city people installing it, I had to give a more finite design using a digital realm. And in my design, I chose to use the rainbow, but not just the rainbow, also some of the added colors of the progressive rainbow flag, which includes skin tones and the transgender flag. So I ended up doing them in what kind of looks like a spectrum, being that we are all one. Like we're all part of this LGBTQ plus community, and that we should like kind of stick together a little bit rather than like looking at us like separate segments of this community. And that was my idea with having it kind of the way that the colors blend together.
Yeah, I really like that. It kind of reminds me of looking at gradient samples like in Illustrator or something like that, where, all the colors are available to you yet seamlessly together at the same time. And you're also adding your signature koi fish to the crosswalk design as well, right?
That is correct. There's going to be some koi on the sidewalks leading up to the crosswalk, and the koi are going to have rainbow coloring in them, other than the black, orange, and white that I do.
You're from Wisconsin. You were born and raised here. You went to school in Milwaukee. What does it mean to you to bring a big piece like this to the city and in the heart of the LGBTQ neighborhood that we go to here in Milwaukee?
It really kind of means a lot. Milwaukee was the city that I was able to live as a gay man, that I didn't have to kind of be in the closet and try to conform to how others wanted me to look or appear or speak. And so for doing it in Milwaukee, it means a lot to me. I definitely consider it my home of being gay as far as that goes. And yeah, it's just beautiful to be recognized for what you do in a place that you've done things at one time. I moved out of Milwaukee out of fear of being arrested for graffiti because I wanted to pursue street art, and murals hadn't quite came to Milwaukee yet, although now there are murals and things like that. So it is quite beautiful for the city to see what I do as art and not to see it as graffiti.
Well, and especially during a time when LGBTQ visibility is literally being erased across the country too, right? There's places like a crosswalk outside the Pulse nightclub in Florida. That rainbow crosswalk was removed overnight. Even at Stonewall, they're literally taking language away at a historic national site. And you mentioned the kind of changing atmosphere of graffiti and murals in Milwaukee from when you left to now. Do you see your art, and especially the way you make art and the way it intersects with queer history, are you motivated now more than ever to continue this work?
I see it as something to inspire me and give me energy to keep making my art. A lot of my art is about queer imagery or queer visibility and a visual safe space for our community, and that we exist too. And as they're trying to push away our visibility with simple thing as a rainbow crosswalk, or even in Washington, D.C., Trump is talking about removing rainbow flags from buildings and all of the other things against the LGBTQ plus community. It has definitely empowered me more to put my images out there and to put rainbows out in different ways in solidarity for the Pulse Memorial crosswalk that was removed. So yeah, it's very sad to see that this is happening, but at the same time, it's not just an issue in our borders. Other countries like Russia, Saudi Arabia, and countries in the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe have all adopted laws against so-called LGBTQ propaganda, and they actually make it so you can't have it in public places for people to see. And so as it's happening here, I think that we should recognize that it's happening elsewhere, and it's something we need to fight for everywhere.
Given that this crosswalk is such a large scale for your public art and people are interacting with it in a different way, right? They're walking across it or they're looking down. How do you hope people see or interact with this piece?
Well, I hope people see it as a marker for the queer community, as that's kind of the neighborhood and where it is, as well as I hope that people kind of slow down at that intersection and give a little bit more attention to people crossing the road and the sidewalk.
So when it comes to being a street artist and the momentum you've gained since 2006 with people recognizing your work, I'm curious about your personal view of when you feel you are making an impact after you've left a piece of art for people.
Well, I get a lot of people sharing images of my art on social media and stuff like that. And I guess that's the way that I can stay most connected to art that exists in states outside that I live in. And I feel like when people are posting these comments and then even going as far as asking to have a tattoo done of the images is when I really start to know that my art is conveying a message that people are enjoying. And that's pretty exciting.
Well, Jeremy, it's been a pleasure to get to know you and your process a little more, and I want to thank you so much for joining me on Lake Effect.
Thank you.
Jeremy Novi is a street and stencil artist and a Wisconsin native. He spoke with Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski. You can see the rainbow crosswalks he designed at 2nd and National in Walker's Point. Have you lost something precious, or are you curious if there might be something valuable hidden on your property? Well, then you'll want to hear our next conversation with a metal detectorist. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. This is Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Excaret Nunez. Have you ever wondered what might be hidden underground? A metal detectorist can help with that. Bruce Ratkowski is a metal detectorist who travels the state helping homeowners who want their old property searched for historical objects. Ratkowski joins me to share about his love for metal detecting and what makes Milwaukee a special place to search. I'm curious, what got you interested in metal detecting and what keeps you going?
My brother-in-law, Tom, and his wife have a property up around Mauston area, and there's a lake up there called Castle Rock Lake that has an island in it. And they take their boat out there, and around that island, there is a lot of sand. So people take and they park their boats, and they wade through the water, and they have parties, and they lose their stuff. And he was a detectorist at the time, and he said, come on, we're going to try this. So, he showed me how to do things and found some interesting items around that island because that island used to be a farmland. They created that lake by damming the Wisconsin River. One of the things that he found, which had nothing to do with metal, in his scoop one time, he brought up a bison tooth. Bison haven't been in Wisconsin for many, many years, and he got that verified by a UWM scientist.
And so how long have you been doing this for? Like, what year was that when you started?
It's about 10 years. Started out slow, and my wife said, I think I'm going to get you a metal detector for your birthday. And so I got a beginner metal detector, and it's been forward since then.
What a gift.
Yes, I was very happy to receive that.
And so I'm curious, you've been doing this for 10 years now. Is there a certain item that really sparked your interest in metal detecting and wonder what else is underground?
Oh my gosh, there's so many items. The big item that people always want to find is gold. I found 3 gold items. I found 2 gold rings and a gold necklace that has a silver cross on it. My friend in the Milwaukee area found a $5 gold piece, which dates back to the mid-1800s, I believe. And that's the prize. That's, you always want to find the gold, the hidden treasure. Another friend went over to England and he found a gold coin that dates back to, I believe, the 1500s. So there's always the gold to find, but most of the stuff you pull out is trash, junk, pop tops, cans, nails, and things like that. But you're always looking for that silver coin or the gold ring or the silver ring. Or if you're on an older property, just something to relate to that property that you can give to that owner and say, well, this looks like a handle from your door or something like that.
And so say you find a gold ring, you're not really in it for the money, are you? Or are you more in for the history of it?
I'm definitely not in for the money. The story I like to tell is that somebody emailed me about losing her mom's gold wedding band. Her mom had passed away when she was 7, and her dad gave her the mom's wedding band. And she said, I was at a family reunion. I lost it. We tried to find it. I'm out here in California. I was at a family reunion in West Bend. Could you try to find it? And I told her, well, I've never found anything intentionally, but I will, I'll recruit a couple guys. Do you have any idea where in the yard it might have been lost? She sent me an overhead picture, and she drew where most of the people were gathering. We got there, and I had 2 guys with me, and my friend found it in 20 minutes.
Wow.
So she got her mom's wedding band back, and she was overjoyed. She said, "What can I give you guys? What can I give you guys?" We told her, we don't want anything. Your happiness that the ring has been found and returned to you is more than enough for us.
So these items have a lot of sentimental value as well as historical value.
Yes. If we find something on a property that, like you said, is sentimental, we always show it to the property owner, and we say, you can decide if you want to keep it or not. If it doesn't belong to them, they can still keep it, or they can, let us have, what we have found. And that happens sometimes, and that's just part of our mantra. We always say, it's found on your property. I'm willing to give it to you. It was the joy of finding it. If we get to keep it, it's bonus for us.
I love that. And so I want to talk about the fact that you recently made a few posts on Facebook asking homeowners if you can metal detect their property. I'm wondering why you would metal detect on a private property instead of sticking to public places like Milwaukee's beaches.
The beaches have been hit hard by other detectorists. During the months of October through April, nobody's on the beach. Nobody's losing their stuff on the beach. Then from May till September, those beaches are populated and people might lose their rings or their bracelets or their change. And then there are a lot of detectorists who go there after those weekends, and they can be kind of territorial sometimes, saying, "Oh, this is my beach, why are you here?" I don't tend to go to beaches very often in Milwaukee. I like to go to private properties, places that other people haven't been to. You always ask for permission. There is never a time when I just go randomly in somebody's yard. That would be trespassing. That's illegal. That breaks the code of a detectorist. So that's why I put out those letters, posts on Facebook looking for those permissions.
And do rules around metal detecting vary across the places that you visit?
Yes. There are some communities where they don't want detectorists in their parks. Milwaukee, sometimes they've been cracked down, the detectorists have been cracked down on, saying, you can't dig here. And that's basically because some detectorists aren't very polite. They don't refill their holes. They leave damage in the parks. We try to refill and flatten down the ground as much as possible so that nobody knows we're there. Different counties have different regulations in their parks where you have to have a permit. Sometimes the permit is just free, where they just want to know that you know the rules. Some counties say, no, we don't want you there at all.
Are there rules of who gets what when it comes to finding things on public and private land?
Public land is a free-for-all, basically. I mean, you find it, it's yours unless it's got some marking on it that you can return it to somebody. Class rings, sometimes people can trace back to other people. There is a small group of detectorists who are called ring finders. So somebody will put a post out and say, I lost my ring so-and-so here and here. And those guys or gals, I should say, will go out and try to find it for them. Private land, always try to show what we find to the homeowners. Like this morning, I was out at a property in Wauwatosa, and it was a more modern property, in mid-50s house. Didn't find a lot, found like 27 cents and change. There was a very small running medal, like from a high school, that I found, and I left with that homeowner. He said, my daughter will be overjoyed to see what you found in the yard. So that stayed with that homeowner. It didn't belong to him, personally, but it's part of their land. That house has been around for 75 years. Who knows who that belonged to?
That's so neat, though.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So in general, I mean, you're kind of speaking to it, other than being basically untapped territory. Is there something special about metal detecting the yards of homes in Milwaukee?
I love the old homes. Milwaukee has great history. Wisconsin was established in 1848. Wisconsin has great ethnic history, especially Milwaukee. So those old houses where, like downtown Milwaukee, just grew outward. And you had those neighborhoods where people congregated in their ethnic groups, the Irish, the German, the Poles. They had their stuff, they had their things, and sometimes we find those things when we go to these yards, and we can relate it to those houses or to those people. And that's the history that we enjoy really finding. Basically, we're modern-day time travelers. What was happening when this 1848 coin was made? Who held it? How did it get dropped? You can think of all kinds of stories to make up about it, but you just really don't know. You just know that it's there, and I found it.
You're the first metal detectorist I've ever met.
Okay.
Is there a metal detecting community in the Milwaukee area?
There is. In fact, we just had a meeting this past Tuesday. We meet once a month at a little restaurant in Cudahy. There are detecting clubs all through Wisconsin.
How many people would you say are in like the Milwaukee area metal detectorist club?
I would say there's probably 50 to 60. There has been a growing number of people showing up at this meeting, which is nice and surprising. It was typically a year ago we'd get maybe 8 guys.
So we've talked about how the thing that you most enjoy about metal detecting is discovering the history of the items you find. What are some of the most interesting items you found?
I found a medallion at a park in Milwaukee that dates back to the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. It was the Columbian World Expo Fair, which commemorated Columbus discovering America. And how did it end up in Milwaukee? It happened in 1893. So that's a memorable one for me. I really enjoyed that one. There's a book that goes along with that. My oldest coin that I've ever found is an 1842 Canadian penny, minted it's called from the Bank of Montreal. It's called a bank token. I don't know if they minted different coins from different areas in Canada, but that's my oldest coin find.
And where did you find that one?
That was at a farm in Kenosha.
Well, for people who might be interested in having you search their yards, where can they reach you?
They can send me an email at thebruce1959@gmail.com.
Bruce, thanks so much for speaking with me today. I'm super excited to get out there with you. And
I brought a detector that I'm going to have you try also.
You're going to have me try one?
Sure, why not?
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay, this changes the game. Okay, I'm so excited. Thanks. Well, I'm thank you for talking to me.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. This is just setting it up for the use of it.
So, would you be okay with recording me?
Yes.
Okay.
As you want it out in front of you.
Okay.
So like you can still be standing up straight, but you want to be able to extend your arm a bit.
Okay. That's it? Is this good?
Yes.
Okay.
Try to keep the coil low to the ground.
Okay. Like that?
Yep. And swing. It should be swung all the time.
Am I going?
You're going fine.
Okay.
That sounds like a bottle top or a tin can.
Or a gold ring. No.
Oh.
We'll keep going.
I think we should check that one out. Let me get the shovel.
Okay.
Okay, swing the detector back and forth. See how it ends when you pull back?
Yeah. So right there.
Yeah. I gotta dig a 3-sided plug.
Digging the plug. I'll go this way.
Okay.
Alright.
And you try to visually see do you visually see anything?
Rocks.
Yep, rocks and soil. Now you're going to use that pinpointer and put it down in the hole, see if it... see you're very close to it, whatever it might be. It's going to be in the sidewall, like behind where you had that pinpointer. I'm going to give you the little shovel.
Okay. Oh, it's a nail.
Those blasted nails.
So why was it so high?
It was a good signal. It's just a mix.
Just a mix.
Yep.
Bummer. I was ready for the ring.
I thought that was going to be a dime or a quarter.
Okay. Well, put this in your pouch.
Okay. standard screw. You just fill it with your hand and stomp your foot on it. So it looks like it's even with the rest of the soil, and that's...
Is that okay?
Yep.
Well, that was fun. Can I do one more?
Oh, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Bruce Ratkowski is a metal detectorist in the Milwaukee area known as the Bruce. That's Lake Effect for today. I'm Excret Nunez. Audrey Nowakowski, Joy Powers, and Sam Woods join me in producing Lake Effect each week, with help from Graham Thomas. Becky Mortensen is our executive producer, and Emily Files helps edit the show. Jason Reevy is our studio engineer, Valeria Navarro Villegas is our digital operations manager, and Trapper Shep wrote our theme music. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at wuwm.com. And if you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Join us again on Monday at noon for more of our favorite conversations from the year. Thanks so much for joining us today on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.